started here, I wanted to mention a correction. So I had given Bonnie some information that then she puts on Facebook, but there's at least one, maybe two, that they really weren't old maids. So yeah, I took them out of the program.
Uh-oh, I'm sorry. Did I mess you up?
No, I did that. Okay. So we should be back up. There we go. The old maids of Maquoketa. Spinsters and old maids. Raise your hand if you know the difference. I didn't know either. So a spinster originally described a professional occupation. And it was in the Middle Ages that women, spinning wool or thread, it was one of the few ways that a single woman could provide for herself and earn an independent living. But by the 17th century, spinster became a formal legal term used on original documents to denote any unmarried woman, regardless of age. And so technically a woman could be a spinster at age 18 or 21 if she was single. The term old maid developed around the 18th century. Unlike spinster, old maid is tied to age and perceived desirability. It was used to describe a woman who had passed the socially expected prime age for marriage, and she was viewed as unlikely to ever marry. So I found this a while back, and I really didn't go back and research any more on this, but if you notice in this article, and this appeared in 1934 in the Quad City Times, and it says, Maquoketa Spinsters, heirs number 71. And she was Miss Eaton, and again, I don't have any more information about her, but if she died, you know, on or before 1934, you know, she would have been born in the 1800s. Does anybody know anything about that case at all? Okay. And that might be a brown bag lunch for another day. Did you know that this month, on June 4th, I missed it too, it was National Old Maids Day. And this shows a picture of, it says, old maids attend a cat funeral. And I can't read, the writing is too small at the bottom to see, but apparently in a different country. So this article that appeared in the 1890 on December 30th in the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and this is what inspired this topic. It reads, the Maquoketa girls had held a meeting and adopted a resolution that girls could not be called old maids until they had reached the age of 30. So Maquoketa has been home to many old maids, and these are the ladies that I will be sharing about. So we have Miss Lulu Moulton, Miss Eva Byerly, Miss Beatrice Sharp, Miss June Weingar, Miss Ruth Shepard, Miss Ida Simpson, Mrs. Hilma and Margaret Drolls, Miss Mary E. Joyner, Miss Eva Longervan, am I saying her name right, Longervan? Miss Delilah Barnes, and Miss Lucille Ralston. So how many of you knew at least one of these amazing ladies? Okay. Most of these old maids were very active in the community, and many of them chose a career in teaching. So years ago, once a female teacher married, it nullified her teaching contract. And then after that for a while, then, you know, you could get married and still remain a teacher. Then I found this article in the Quad Cities Times. In 1927, this was published. And it was kind of like the school board was pretty upset about all of these unmarried women getting married. It just really made them upset. So they decided that unmarried women were going to be given preference from now on. And Mole was the superintendent again. And so determined to take the Maquoketa schools out of the matrimonial agency class, the school board ordered in the new contracts, It is further understood and agreed that in case of marriage by the teacher before the expiration of the contract, the said school board reserves the right to cancel this contract. This clause, it said, is included only in the contracts given to the women teachers. The board also adopted a resolution that hereafter no married women with husbands will be hired in the local schools. And as a result, 2 women who had been teaching for several years, they weren't going to be offered contracts the following year. The matrimony ban was a direct result of the marriage within the last 2 years of 3 school teachers in the schools. The board feels that a woman who is married during the school year is not as likely to give thorough attention to her duties as a teacher. The determination to give preference to unmarried women has come partly because of the complaints heard that married women with husbands to support them ask for the job merely to get PIN money. What is PIN money? Just your own spending money? Mm-hmm. Okay. And that unmarried women who have to support themselves should be given preference if other qualifications are equal. So the teacher contract, if you want to look at that teacher contract, it is at the other museum on the 2nd floor. And this is what it said in 1923. So the teacher was to receive $75 a month for 8 months. And in her agreement, it says, Miss Blank agrees to not get married. This contract becomes null and void if the teacher gets married. Not to keep company with men. To be home between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. unless in attendance of a school function. Not to loiter downtown into the ice cream shops.
Sinful ice cream.
Not to leave town at any time without the permission of the chairman of the Board of Trustees. Not to smoke cigarettes. This contract becomes null and void immediately if a teacher is found smoking. Not to drink beer, wine, or whiskey. This contract becomes null and void immediately if the teacher is found drinking beer, wine, or whiskey. Not to ride in a carriage or an automobile with any man except her husband, or except her brother or her father.
So the men could drink.
I think so. I think the men could drink, yeah. And still be employed. They weren't to dress in bright colors. They weren't allowed to dye their hair. And they had to wear at least 2 petticoats. I was kind of surprised in 1923 they were still wearing petticoats. And then the dresses could not be more than 2 inches above the ankles. Along with all the teaching duties and all the things they've agreed to in their personal life, they were to keep the schoolroom clean, sweep the classroom floor at least once a day, and to scrub it at least once a week with hot water and soap. Clean the blackboard at least once a day, and to start the fire at 7 a.m. so that the room would be warm by 8 o'clock when the children arrived. They weren't allowed to use face powder, mascara, or lipstick. So now, imagine my surprise. I had to put this in here. So I'm looking up about an old maid and on Ancestry, and I come across these pictures. This person was born in Jackson County. She's about the same age as one of the ladies in this presentation, and look at that. She's drinking and she's smoking. And I thought, oh my gosh, Miss led a double life. And then, then I figured it out. It was just somebody that had the same name, lived in Jackson County, but, could have been related. And she can't even look like this lady. It's like, I just thought that was pretty fun. So we'll start with Miss Lulu Moulton. She was a beloved high school teacher who taught for maybe only 3 years in Maquoketa. And shown as a student sketch, maybe not the most flattering sketch, of Miss Moulton that appeared in the 1912 edition of The Talk, which is a high school yearbook. And the quote from that edition, it tells about what The Talk stood for. The issues are common sense, not gossip. But as has been said in years gone by, a little nonsense now and then is relished by the best of men. Of course, we do not claim to be the best of men, but we do appreciate a joke. What would a school be without a little sunshine? It would be a developing place of bachelors, old maids, and grouches. Miss Moulton was born in Nashville, Jackson County in 1880, the daughter of Thomas Jefferson Moulton II and Melinda Coleman Moulton. She graduated in the class of 1898, and I've been unable to find a yearbook or, oh actually no, because I did say that was in the yearbook. But I did find this commencement exercise brochure. They were held at the Grand Opera House on June 9, 1898, and shown as a list of the graduates. And Miss Moulton is on the left, on the top. And in the interest of time, I won't read all those other names. So during commencement, Miss Moulton read an essay titled Vision of Sir Longfellow. In the 1914 talk, there was a dedication to Miss Moulton. She was the Latin teacher that year and worked under the supervision of Superintendent Storm. And this is what the students quoted about Miss Moulton. To one whose character and personality have been a source of inspiration to all who have come in contact with her, who is enshrined in the hearts of all her high school students, this book is affectionately dedicated. Another thing I guess I want to mention too is that these teachers, along with giving up all this stuff, not being able to do things in their personal life, anytime they did do something, it got in the paper. I mean, if they had an infected toenail, that was in the paper. If they went and visited somebody, that was in the paper. Where they went to spend their Christmas. And so in 1900, it said, Miss Lulu Moulton expects to depart the latter part of this week, although this had to do with college, for Iowa City to commence the collegiate course at the State University. And her brother Mark had left for Iowa City, and he was going to be finishing his law career that year. And then another brother was a surgeon. In 1903, the Daily Iowan Women's Edition listed Lulu as an assistant manager for the paper. And the following year, she was elected president of her sorority at the State University. She received her Bachelor of Philosophy in 1904. And then her teaching career led her accepting various grades in various cities and states. And after graduation, she accepted a position to teach 9th grade at Storm Lake, Iowa. In 1905, the following year, she was teaching Latin and German in Decorah. When she attended her class reunion in 1920, it listed her residence as living in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And then by 1932, she was living in the state of Washington, where she was the president of the Washington Federation of Business and Professional Women. And then when she came back, they honored her with a tea in Maquoketa, telling about that in that article. And then her obituary in 1952, she lived to be 72 years old, and she did pass away while living in Seattle, but she is buried here in Mount Hope. Miss Eva M. Byerly taught German and history at the Maquoketa High School in 1904. She was born in about 1875, and I found where she was born in Enamosa, and then I've also found where she was born in Jackson County, so it had to be one or the other. And she attended Enamosa High School and the State College of Iowa at Cedar Falls. She was the oldest of 6 children and was raised on a farm. And this photo of her appeared in the 1904 yearbook. And according to census records for 1910, 20, 30s, and 40s, she was a high school teacher in Cedar Rapids. And even at the age of 65, she remained in her profession, and she was teaching social science at that time at the high school. By 1950, she had retired and was living back home in her town of Enamosa. After teaching in Enamosa, Maquoketa, and West Waterloo, she had joined the staff of Washington High School in Cedar Rapids in 1909. Latin and Roman history were her subjects. When Washington was closed, she moved to Franklin High School, where she continued to teach until 1944, and then she retired. She was a member of People's Church, the PEO, the DAR, also the Concord Round Table Club. She had taken postgraduate work at both Michigan and Columbia. And in 1931, she served on the executive board as treasurer for the Cedar Rapids College Club. In 1931 yearbook, it said, what do the teachers do outside of school hours? And so Ms. Eva Byerly, at that time, was teaching modern history at Washington High School, and she listed gardening as a hobby. She said she raised wildflowers, and she had more than 50 different kinds of wildflowers in her garden. The photos shown of her here are from the 1927 and 28 yearbooks. Now this was kind of interesting. I didn't get a chance to look up too much of this, but in 1928, the yearbook lists her as a patrician. And this group was founded in 1925 with the purpose to promote a fuller appreciation of Roman life and literature, and she was listed as a critic of the group. Miss Byerly was a descendant of George Creamer, who had served as a private in the Pennsylvania Continental Line under Colonel John Phillips de Haas. And he was born in Germany and passed away in Pennsylvania. Miss Beatrice Sharp. How many of you remember Beatrice Sharp? I just remember the name. Miss Beatrice Sharp taught at the Second Ward School in Maquoketa for many years under the direction of Miss Josephine Filter, who was the principal. I talked about Miss Josephine Filter. She and her sister had gone out, one of the western states, and was reported as missing, but she did come back. Well, Miss Beatrice Sharp taught 4th and 5th grade music. She graduated with the Maquoketa class in 1915. Her yearbook quote, she wrote, "What more can I do to help someone become happier?" She received her BA from the University of Iowa in 1948. In 1923, she was teaching at Second Ward for grades 4 and 5, and she suffered quite a few health issues. It didn't really say what it was, that she had, but in December of 1931, she was granted a leave of absence for the remainder of the year due to ill health, and at that time, Miss Vera Griffin took over for her. And then the following year, she was a patient at the University of Iowa, a university hospital, and she was absent for almost a year, again due to illness. And then years later, 1939, again, she was gone for a whole semester. So I'm just not sure what she was battling. Did anybody know her enough to know what?
She was my 3rd grade teacher, but I don't remember her being sick.
Miss Sharp sang and played the piano for many community events. She was a member of the Legion Auxiliary and the Allude Club, and that was listed in 1937. I don't know what the Allude Club is. She was a Sunday school teacher for the Baptist Church, but then later it said she belonged to the Methodist Church. In the 30s, she was in charge of when the children would sing the Christmas carols, and she belonged to BPW Club. And in 1933, she sang songs that were in Italian, French, and German. So I don't know if she spoke those languages or just enough to, learn the song. And in 1933, she presented a report at the district picnic. And at that time, Anna Wendell, it said, was called to the phone and told about a family that had 7 children and they didn't have any food. And so then this group donated. At first I thought they gave him several jars, like that, jars of food. I thought that's going to go a long way. It's for 7. But then they also gave money along with that to go buy food. 1935 article, teacher wage in Maquoketa is equalized. So by then, the grade teachers were getting $787.50 the following year. But the high school and the junior college teachers received several $100s more than that. In 1931, Miss Sharp was a voice pupil of Kent Gannon. And shown is a schedule that appeared in the newspaper in 1936. It says, tuning in on the University of Iowa. And so she was listed as performing music. You could listen to her at 7:30 at night. And I guess that would be WSUR. The Maquoketa PTA's had an operetta presentation. The story, arranged as a short operetta with original dialogue and song, was sung by Miss Beatrice Sharp. And this was presented by the third grade pupils, Miss Sharp and Miss Lucille Ralston. Miss Ralston was the reader, and Miss Sharp was the pianist. Miss Sharp died at the Jackson County Public Hospital in 1985. She had taught school in the Maquoketa district for 41 years, retiring in 1977, and she had graduated from the American Conservatory of Music in Chicago and the Indianapolis Conservatory of Music in Indianapolis. She received her bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Iowa. Miss June Weingart. I'm sure a lot of you remember June Weingart. Longtime Maquoketa teacher June M. Weingart, 81 years old, died at the hospital in 1999. She was born in Chester, Iowa, and was laid to rest in Chester Hill Cemetery. Per her wishes, she didn't have a public visitation or service. And interestingly, her mother died at the same age she died, age 81. Her parents had moved to Maquoketa after her father, Chester, had retired from work as a mail carrier. And so Ms. Weingart had attended Chester High School in 1932 and 33. And while she was there, she was in the Glee Club, D-Clan, operetta. And while at Maquoketa High School in 34 and 35, she was a member of the Glee Club, was in the Belle of Barcelona, was the senior vice president, and on the senior edition staff. And so at the back of the yearbooks, and I think they were still doing that when I was in school, they would write something about, how you see yourself and how everybody else sees you. And so how she saw herself, only they called it the horoscope. She saw herself as a teacher. And then it said how the rest of us see her, champion potato peeler. I don't know what the story is that goes along with that. Miss Weingart retired in 1982 after teaching for 41 years in the Maquoketa schools. And before that, she had taught in the rural schools near Maquoketa. On the left is her senior picture. She graduated with the class of 1935. And this photo was taken at Success Studio in Maquoketa. And the photo on the right was taken about 2 years later. And then the siren is the yearbook for the junior college. And so this is her picture that was in the 1937 edition. And some names, some of her classmates you might know, Maxine Moorhead and Margaret Joyner were classmates of her.
My dad.
And your dad. Okay, I missed that. In 1936, June was enrolled in the junior college. She sang a solo on commencement day for the eighth grade graduates of the rural schools. It says 151 students received their 8th grade diploma that day. 4 ladies from Maquoketa in this Des Moines photo taken in 1946. And on the far right is Miss Weingart. And then starting on the left, Vera Wild, Nadine Pierce, and Zelda Griffin. By 1947, she was teaching kindergarten at 4th Ward School and at 1st Ward. So she must have gone, back and forth. At that time, kindergarten was just a half day, so she had quite a schedule. In 1948, she was teaching kindergarten at 1st Ward School. And I don't know, maybe that was when it went to full days in 48. So we know. It seemed like so. We only went. Yeah. Okay. In maybe she had 2 classes. They probably had a morning class and an afternoon class. There was a beauty contest that she was in, and Mrs. Esther Penrose won the honor. And other entries besides June was also Vera, although I thought it was Vita Cassidy. It says Vera Cassidy. Maybe those are 2 different.
Both are right. There were 2 people.
2 different people. Motion pictures were shown Friday afternoon in Miss June Weingart's room at 4th Ward School, where parents were invited to see a projector that had been purchased recently by the PTA. I kind of wonder what that cost them, too, back then. On May 11, 1951, Mother's Day programs, this is you, Helen, are in this part. The Mother's Day programs were presented at meetings of the Congregational Women's Fellowship and Methodist Women's Society. Miss June Weingart was the hostess, circle chairman, and led the group singing. Tributes in verse were read by Helen Jane Mitchell to the mothers. Do you remember doing that in 1951? How could you forget that? And here's, Bonnie provided me with this photo. This is a wedding photo of Gaylord Willman and his wife Betty. And then you can see June Weingar, got the red arrow there. So she was the matron, or yeah, matron of honor, maid of honor. And June had served as a clerk for the Congregational Church. And I believe this is the Congregational Church where that wedding took place. And here she is again. She's posing in front of what was then the Maquoketa High School. And this photo was taken in 1936 or 37. And so you have from left to right Maxine Romer, Elva Grunwald, Ruth Holtz, and then June. June was the recording secretary for the BPW Club. She was involved in Maquoketa's summer recreation program in 1958. And this program was provided for children from 3 years old to age 12. And so they had, at the 3 ward parks, and also the area adjacent to the swimming pool. So they held craft classes and then game groups. And kids were divided into age brackets. And this is what I was really surprised is, and I don't know, she may have even volunteered for this, but that was held for 8 weeks in the summer, and it was from 9 to 4, Monday through Friday, for 8 weeks. And then she taught Sunday school besides, so she just had kids year-round. It said no fee was charged, and Miss Weingar was in charge of the activities of the first ward park. Now I remember, like in the early 60s, they still had that craft program going on. And this is the Siren, the yearbook, the class of 1937 junior college. I don't know what happened to my arrow. It's almost like it should be up. So she's in the second? Yeah, that's something with the arrow. Second row, oh, because when I moved my picture, that's what happened. I repositioned that. Second row, the fourth from the left is June. So your father would be in this picture too?
No, he went to Beloit after school.
Okay. So the Siren, they had what they called, the students would get to come up with some special day. And so they did what they called Futuristic Day. And so they declared March 18th was Futuristic Day. And on this day, all members planned to contrive costumes and styles which might be worn by them 50 years from now. And I'm not sure which one she is in there. In 1935, the Maquoketa graduating class held a reunion. And I was a little bit confused about this at first because she is Mary Joyner. Oh, actually, I have these out of order. I do. So I'll be talking about Mary Joyner too, but I probably have this in here because Miss Weingar's in here as well, but then I'll be talking about Mary Joyner, who's in the first row, the fourth from the left. So she was the old maid school teacher, but then just above her in the white dress to the right is her sister-in-law, and her name also was Mary Joyner. Miss Ruth Esther Shepherd was born in 1887, the daughter of Reverend Samuel and Sarah Moody Shepherd. And in 1911, she received her Bachelor of Arts from Grinnell College, and by 1923, she was teaching English at Maquoketa High School. She was a small child when her mother died, and then her father died when she was just 17, but before he died, he had remarried. And so she continued to live with her stepmother until her stepmother died. And so first they lived on Platt Street, and then they moved to Pleasant, and then to Maple, and then lastly they resided on South 4th Street. And shown in the photo is a picture of her mother, Sarah. Miss Ida Simpson, Maquoketa librarian. Ida Simpson donated many yearbooks to the library, and those can still be found. They're in the history room. How many of you have been? Do you know where the history room is at the library? 1954, the Boardman Institute became the reference division of the new library, and Miss Ida Simpson took charge of the enlarged institution, continuing until 1921. So I'd kind of forgotten about that they had did, an addition besides the original. And this photo was taken the first year that the library was open in 1904. And that's the original checkout desk, which it says is now on display at the library. But is that in the same spot? Does anybody know? So it says, interesting features of this photo include the electric lights. Yes, there was electricity in 1904. A pendulum-style clock, the fringed scarf on the side table, white lace collar, and fashionable dark dress worn by Miss Simpson. Miss Ida Simpson enjoyed traveling. In 1901, she traveled to the eastern states and Europe. And in 1905, she took a trip to the east with her mother, Mrs. Wash Simpson. And in 1916, she spent several weeks in Denver with Mrs. M.F. Canal. And here's a postcard of the interior of the library, and shown is Miss Simpson. She tendered her resignation in 1920 at the library board meeting, and she had been a librarian for the past 30 years. But even though she was retiring, she continued to support the library, serving as the director in 1921. And then in 1930, she was the chairman of the book committee. And after 16 years of service as superintendent of the Congregational Sunday School, she retired due to ill health. But she continued to support the church, participating in meetings and planning the Christmas program, and continued to teach Sunday school. And she died at the age of 87. After her death, people had given memorials that were used to purchase hymnals for the church. In 1894, she had organized a literary club for young women and was assisted by Edith Reynolds. And that's when the Tuesday Club was formed. And at first they just met at members' houses, but then they decided that it would be better to have a room of their own for serious study. And so they met at Rice's store on the second floor. And they actually met weekly, not just monthly, but weekly. When she retired from the library board in 1939, her position was replaced by Mrs. Carolyn Penny. And in 1926, she served as treasurer for the Jackson County Health Association. Shown are the members of the Outlook Club. And you can see, doesn't really look like her from the other pictures, but she's older now. Second from the left. And then there are other ladies there too. I'm just going to keep going. Miss Hattie Miller, who was her cousin, was the public librarian during her absence when she went traveling with her mother. January 7th, 1921. For 30 years of faithful and efficient service as city librarian, Miss Ida Simpson was tendered a formal reception by members of the Boardman and Carnegie boards in the public library rooms. Addresses were given by Dr. D.N. Luce and George L. Mitchell. She was presented with a gold wristwatch. Miss Helen Morris has been elected to fill in her place. In 1929, she gave a reading around the old melodeon, recalling days before the phonograph and the radio had spoiled the family circle around the old wheat organ. And let's see, so this was kind of interesting too. It says that this church group met. They met because they were discussing the Sunday school problems that they had. They didn't really elaborate on what those were. October 4th, 1937. Mrs. Barton will be hostess for the Women's Home Missionary Society meeting of the Methodist Church. The Country Club women will hold a bingo party. And let's see, in 1938, which is what this photo was about, was the Old Settlers Committee. And Miss Ida Simpson is in this photo, and I believe she is the one in the white dress. And so those were the Prairie Schooner pioneers. And so I believe that this group was in the parade when they celebrated. In 1951, she passed away, and she had been a librarian for more than 30 years. She's buried in the Zwingle Cemetery. She had come to Maquoketa in 1883 and was one of the first Maquoketa librarians. And I think she was the first one in the new building. So I'm not sure where that other building was before. Miss Hilma Joels, who remembers her? Hilma Joels. And so these are some pictures of Hilma that I found on Ancestry. I thought those were kind of cute. I'd like to see younger pictures of people that I just only knew them when they were older. So she was quite the student. In 1928, there was a spelling contest that she was in. And then in 1931, she got second place in a state academic contest in the category of world history. She was born in 1915, and she graduated with the class in 1933. And some of her classmates were George Goodnow, J.E. Goodnow, Melvin Kelchner, Walter Rockroar, Maxine Sagers, Paul Skelly, and Glenn Woods. She served on the she was the school board secretary in 1947, and then she was also involved in the Volunteers of America. And here is a photo from the annual school board meeting held in Maquoketa. And Hilma, second from the left with the big white collar. And in 1978, she was the Maquoketa librarian. And she held that position as head librarian for 17 years. And then she was very highly regarded, and so they had her involved when they were inspecting the ballots in 1952. Miss Margaret Joels was Hilma's sister. Miss Margaret Celeste Joels is seated in the front. She was born in 1912. In 1930, Margaret placed third in American government when competing with 39 other schools for the right to represent the district at the state meet. In 1930, she was the president of the local BPW, and in 1944, she was the finance chairman. She was the BPW treasurer, served as the church clerk. She died at the age of 81 after a brief illness. And she also had been a legal secretary at Schinthaler and Lee Law Firm for many years, retiring in 1986. She was interested in politics and loved reading and doing crossword puzzles. 1980, same job for 50 years. Margaret Joels. So I'm wondering, how did she have time to do that? Plus she was a librarian, but has the unique distinction of having held the same job for 50 years. She started work at $8.50 a week for attorneys Hillis Lee and Everett Schinthaler. Margaret was honored recently by Schinthaler, Roberg, and Bartelt with a special reception. That was in 1980. So was she a librarian first? Does anybody know?
Is that her sister the librarian? I don't know.
But this is the article. I mean, this is in the, I'm not sure.
I didn't think so, but maybe.
Maybe they made a mistake. Because it says Margaret. I'm not sure.
Or what does it say she was a librarian?
Earlier, I
Did it?
found it.
Okay.
And I think it was in her obituary.
Okay.
So maybe that was a mistake. So maybe she wasn't the librarian. It was her. Miss Mary E. Joyner. Mary E. Joyner was the daughter of Otis and Charlotte Condell Joyner. She was born in 1886 and died in 1971. And she was also a sister to Melvin Joyner, where we get Joynerville. In 1948, she was the guidance director at the high school. She is, I already showed that photo before, so she's the fourth from the left. And then here are some more pictures of Mary Joyner. The one on the left is her college photo. She received her master's degree from Columbia University in 1925. And that same year, she was elected president. And it was in 1926, Roger?
I have to say that there was a Mary E. Joyner no smoking, no drinking award that you got when you were a senior.
I've got that in here. I'm
Really?
going to tell about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So you remember about that. Yeah, no, I have it, and I have the list of the boys that got that year. So it was in 1947 that due to ill health, she had taken a month's leave of absence at the suggestion of her physician. She had been a member of the faculty for more than 25 years and was a mathematics teacher and had been a principal twice, and during the war she had filled both positions when Mr. Warburg had resigned in 1945. So at one time she was principal, but then she plus was teaching as well. So this one, in 1920, ladies in waiting in Maquoketa are feeling encouraged. Spinsters in this section of Iowa are beginning to brighten up and view the future with less pessimism. The pupils of the high school in Maquoketa have just held a debate on the question, are old maids more beneficial than married women? And the affirmative won. This being a leap year and everything, well, this world is not such a hard old pill after all. 1933, Principal Mary Joyner handed out citizen awards. This is what Roger was just talking about. She also handed out pins to 9 boys of the class who had not used tobacco nor intoxicants. Among the 9 were Walter Rockroar and Charles Joyner.
I got the award, but I fudged just a little bit.
Did you? You're going to have to give that back. Miss Eva Longerden. This is a 1926 yearbook photo. During our 4 years in Maquoketa High, the seniors of 1926 as a class have gained the special friendship of 2 of our worthy faculty. Miss Longerden, as freshman advisor, helped lead us out of the wilderness and educated us to the best of her ability. Let's see. Therefore, we, the class of 1926, dedicate this edition of showing our appreciation for their unfailing support, unselfish interest, and hearty cooperation to Miss Longerden and Miss Coney. Miss Longerden is second from the right, second from the left, shown with other district school teachers. And in this headline it says, Miss Longerden ends 46 years at Maquoketa High School. And this was in 1968. A point in my life that I will never forget in my 7-week trip to Europe in 1960. The most unusual event of the trip was when I discovered that my luggage was on a flight to Paris while I was on my way to Rome. She was leaving after having completed 46 years of service. She had attended school at Traer, Iowa, and later went on to get her BA from the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls. She began her career teaching in a rural school and stayed there for 3 years. When she came to Maquoketa, she taught shorthand, typing, bookkeeping, and business English. And then she was teaching secretarial science as well. She had been an advisor, and during the summer months, she spent much of her time visiting in California. Why did she choose Maquoketa? It was the first job I was offered, and I needed the job, so I took it. When I came to Maquoketa, she said, I was only going to be here for a short time. What I wanted to be all along was a doctor. And then after a few years, she decided she was too old at that point to go back to get her medical degree. And then she said if she started all over again, she wouldn't say that she wouldn't teach, but there were so many things that she wanted to do. And here at her reception for her retirement, helping the guest register, is Marceline Lamborn, and she was a former student. And then June Weingar on the left is pinning on the corsage. They said that more than 200 people attended her retirement party. I have that slide twice. And there she is. She's clutching a telegram from Congressman John Culver. He must have sent her congratulations. And then you see Dr. Broman in the right photo. And the typewriter was a gift from the members of the student council. She talked about how the kids were so great. She said, yeah, there were a few that were problem makers, but she said, she explained that she was there to help the students and that to treat everyone as an individual. She kind of had a sort of a chaotic schedule here. She said she would write instructions on the board for typing. Then she'd have to go into the next room and conduct another class. And then she'd peek through the windows to see if those typing students were doing okay. And they said that that schedule, and I'm not for sure how many years, but that continued until about 1930. And then finally they hired another person, so they had one for each room. And the retired teachers met. Didn't put the year on this, but you can see, actually that's Mrs. Long again.
Second from the left is Ramona Gray from Sebula,
Second from the left.
in the bottom row.
Now, okay, so it says in the front row, it shows Harriet Fowler, Ramona Gray.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
And
the-
was she your teacher?
No,
Oh,
she
you
was
just
my
know.
husband's aunt.
Okay. Elizabeth Henriksen, Helen Felton, Leona Bonsack, and Alice Schrader. And then in the second row is John Hutchings, Maureen Hutchings, Bertha Nims, Lucille Ralston, and Elizabeth Longren. And then at the end is Opal Golden. And she didn't marry either, did she, Opal Golden?
Harriet Fowler was my first grade teacher in country school.
Okay, and
She's on the
she's the
left.
one in the front row.
Yep.
Yeah.
So she was Mrs. Golden, right? She was a PE teacher. Wasn't she Mrs. Golden? So she
Golden?
must have married.
Oh, so she did marry.
It was Mrs. Gold.
Yeah, Mrs. Golden.
So Miss Delilah Barnes was a teacher in the 3rd Ward School. I've had a trouble finding a picture of the outside of this 3rd Ward School. Was that like gone, like a really long time ago? Because
It's the building that's now the middle school and the elementary kids for a time were on the first floor.
that's where
That's
3rd
Third
Ward
Ward.
was? Okay, that's why I can't find those pictures. But. So Maquoketa has a teacher in the primary department in the 3rd Ward School that is entitled to a pension. She has taught school for 42 years. And it said that that some of her students were Congressman Martin and a senator from Nebraska. She also had the distinction of being Iowa's oldest teacher in 1909. And she not only taught for 42 years in the same school, but same school district, but in the same school, in the same room.
Wow.
I just found that really incredible. My first year of teaching, and I went back and forth between 2 different schools, and I think I had like 10 different places where I conducted classes during the day. I didn't really like have my own room. Can't imagine being in the same room, how much stuff you'd accumulate in that room too. Now this I did find, it was a Dr. Bowen that had a scrapbook, and I believe it says at the bottom, 3rd Ward. So I think these are students from inside the 3rd Ward School. And it listed Delilah Barnes as a teacher for that year. And if this is correct, this was taken in 87 or 88, that photo. Miss Lucille Ralston. Lucille Ralston was named Catherine Lucille Ralston, the daughter of Frank and Hannah. She lived to be about 95 years old, dying in 1999. Her sister Irene also never married and lived to be about 100. And these photos of the school staff members was taken in 1959. And Miss Ralston is in that second row, second from the left. Has a smile on her face. Other teachers you might remember that are up there: Vera Griffin, Ilsa Johnson, Ruth Levin, Helen Hevlin, Betty Sherman, Carol Ovalstead, Lois Gibson, and Helen Frank. She was one of my favorite teachers, Mrs. Frank. And Maquoketa School faculty shown. Second from left is Beatrice Sharp, we talked about earlier. And then to her right is Lucille Ralston. And then I believe this is June Weingarten in that picture as well. Two honored at T, two second grade teachers who were retiring, Miss Lucille Ralston, who had taught for 22 years, and Miss Manuela Wendell. She was one of my teachers. Had been teaching for 13 years. Prior to that, both had taught at the rural schools. But now Mrs. Wendell was not an old maid, so she had, I don't know, 3 daughters, maybe? Helen Stoddard was born about 1911. I think probably most of you remember that name, Helen Stoddard. And this is her 1930 University of Iowa yearbook photo. She graduated from Maquoketa High School in 1927 and from the University of Iowa in 1930. And she received a master's degree 3 years later. She taught for 15 years, 2nd grade through 8th grades at Maquoketa's 1st and 4th Ward schools and the junior house. She developed courses on Iowa history and taught social studies, visiting all 50 states and 77 foreign countries, collecting first-hand knowledge to share with her students. She retired in 1975. This was a painting that was titled "In an Old Maid's Window." That was painted somewhere between 1933 and 34. Does anyone have anything they want to share about any of teachers that they had?
I had Helen Stoddard in Clinton when I was in high school.
Oh, she taught in Clinton as well.
She taught social studies and civics,
Okay.
and had a very different kind of testing.
She did.
Yeah, she did.
She had a brilliant mind. And
She did.
She was very, but she was good with people, I think.
She was very good to the Historical Society and left us many things about her travels, so there's many things at the other building that belong to Helen Stoddard.
Anybody else?